Good morning, afternoon, and evening, people of the internet. This is yet another stirring edition of the Hardline According to Stonefruit with my ace, Mark French.
Hey, good day, everybody.
We're about a year into this, a year plus, my buddy.
Going by fast.
Yes. And as usual, when we pregame these podcasts, we both wish that we had been recording because it's so awesome. So we're going to experiment a little today, and we have, as usual, written material accompanying this at stonefruit.substack.com, which we may integrate into this discussion without a direct one-to-one focus on those pieces. But as our conversations usually do, we have tended to range far and wide around a variety of topics. So we have decided to just experiment on this one and just see where it takes us. Taking as our general thesis the fact that the US-led G7 neoliberal finance capital order and SWIFT banking messaging system order is over. And where are the opportunities to not only survive, but to thrive in our remaining decades and the lives of the young ones of our loved ones and our families and any potential investors even. So I'm not even sure how we should start this off. Perhaps we should start it off with Nordstream, the bombing of Nordstream, which, as the much lauded investigative journalist Seymour Hersh has clearly laid out, was the greatest act of industrial sabotage of the 21st century, coordinated by the United States and the participation of Norway. And I would argue that that explosion, disabling 3 of the 4 pipelines supporting cheap natural gas from Russia to Germany, will in the end prove to be America's Suez Canal moment.
Yeah, it could very well turn out that way. Absolutely. I mean, talk about an expensive overreach.
Yeah, and because we have a bunch of absolute sophomores at the helm, because Seymour Hersh's article said that they had a steering committee with Treasury and CIA and all the heavy hitters, but the real decision makers were Biden, Blinken, Sullivan, and Newland. Well, Biden has oatmeal for brains.
He's not deciding anything.
And Blinken was the second choice after Michelle Flournoy, his business partner.
Yeah.
And a Democratic neocon.
Yeah.
And Jake Sullivan was Hillary's campaign manager and became her chief of staff when she was Secretary of State. And Newland's family is from Eastern and Central Europe and just has a hair up her ass against Russia, just based on family ties.
Sure.
And creates mayhem wherever she goes. She was just lately in Sudan, and they've had a military coup. So since these rank amateurs are running the show, they thought blowing up Nordstream would be so clever, but I think it's a Suez Canal type moment. But that happened so quickly, destroying the pound sterling and definitively destroying the last elements of international leadership left by the echoes of the British Empire. But the Nord Stream bombing, it'll be like a time delay.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's fully penetrated the German public consciousness that their closest ally on planet Earth, where they're still hosting, I believe it's 30,000 American troops, and that Germany is the physical nexus of the offshore elements of the American empire, that their closest ally did this to them.
Yeah. Well, and to take it a little bit further, the idea that German intelligence was not privy to the information of Norway's involvement, I have a bridge to sell you. That's preposterous. So for them to blush and be shy and not address that publicly, their own domestic population is a lot more politically active than Americans. The idea that they're just swallowing that whole cloth can't be the case there.
Yes, it was just off of Bornholm Island in the Baltic
Mm-hmm.
Sea, which is a Danish possession. And it went through Swedish waters. And it's a 49% Germany and other partner owned project. So Germany, Denmark, and Sweden have all conducted their own investigations. And Sweden said, yeah, we know what happened, but based on pre-existing security arrangements with allies, we're not going to tell you what happened. So I believe all three of those intelligence agencies know exactly
Yeah.
what happened.
Yeah.
And the comments of Biden when a reporter asked him about Nordstream, and when Biden said, if Russian tanks go into Germany, Ukraine again, we will put an end to Nord Stream. It will no
There
longer.
will not be a Nord Stream 2. Yeah.
Those are,
A
I
year
believe,
prior. Yeah.
those I believe are the exact words.
Yes, there will not be a Nord Stream 2. He said that
And
more than once.
who was standing 3 feet next to President Biden? The German chancellor.
That's right.
And he was standing right next to him as he said, we're going to destroy your pipeline.
Yeah.
And so, commentators trying to cover for Biden said, well, he didn't say blow it up. He said, well, that could just mean sanctions or whatever. Uh-huh. Yeah. And then, of course, the other comments were Blinken saying that, well, this is a tremendous opportunity for us to finally help Europe disassociate itself from the incredible terroristic tool of cheap, omnipresent Russian energy.
Yeah. They want to quadruple their energy bills immediately.
Yeah. And Norway and Newland said in Congress to Ted Cruz saying, we, like you, are very gratified that Nord Stream is now a hunk of metal at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. So motive means an opportunity. Motive, we can take that even as far back as Condoleezza Rice in 2014. Mm-hmm. She said, we need to share the bounty of American fracking and all these ecologically heinous activities that have made America a net exporter again, a major exporter, I think the largest exporter for the last several years.
Sure.
With Europe, because what America has always feared is a combination of German capital and technology with Russian resources and manpower.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been an aspiration of longstanding for the American elites. And so that comment from Condoleezza in 2014, Biden's comment, I believe it was 2021, there's motive, opportunity. Well, they had the NATO Baltops military exercises in the Baltics right before the Nord Stream bombing. Mm-hmm. And the theme of the operations were using unmanned underwater vehicles for demining. Perfect cover. Okay. Motive, opportunity, means.
Well, and then the other interesting thing about what you say, and the point that Hirsch brought up, there aren't that many diving facilities that purposely offer education and training to that specificity and level. They're very few. I double dog dare you to find somewhere to learn how to dive that takes it to that level. So when Hirsch named the specific place where these men were training, it's very difficult to replicate levels of education and facilities of that level. They just don't happen very often. They're very few and far between. The idea that it was some Ukrainian Rotary Club, which NPR was pushing or whatever, I mean, it's just it's silly. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, where the bombings occurred was the shallowest places that the Nordstream pipelines went through.
Yeah,
But that's still 290 feet below sea level.
That's deep.
I imagine the number of divers on the planet that can get that deep safely and come out safely is probably in the very low 3 digits.
Yeah.
And I would imagine the people that can get down that low and stay long enough to leave 1,200 kilograms of C4 in exactly the right places to destroy one of the most well shielded infrastructure installations on planet Earth is probably in the low 2 digits.
Yeah.
And Seymour Hersh identified a Navy dive team out of Panama City, Florida.
That's right.
And as I understand, I've read his article. It's not that long, and it's free on his Substack. And as I understand it, because they used Navy divers and not Navy SEALs or any covert arm, they didn't have to they technically didn't have to notify Congress. So they didn't have any oversight. So motive, means, and opportunity. The means is the insanely skilled divers of Norway and the US Navy. And they used a lot of Navy ships, including one that Norway Navy ships, including one that had a decompression chamber on board. And the original plan was to blow it up almost right away, but they were still having the military exercises. So Biden and those other 3 got cold feet and wanted a way to delay it. So they created a way to delay it. So Norway's additional further participation was to throw sonar buoys out near it that could set off, I believe it was just audio that went through the water.
The detonation timer. That's exactly right.
Yeah, the audio from these sonar buoys set off the detonation timers in the C4 to blow up 3 out of the 4 pipelines.
Yeah.
And the day after it happened, Norway's natural gas pipeline to one of America's most stalwart allies in Europe, Poland, opened. The Norway to Poland pipeline opened the day after the Nord Stream explosion, suddenly making Poland a major transit center.
Sure.
To buy gas that was 4 times more expensive than that was being provided by Russia.
Yeah, that's right. That rough back of the envelope math is correct.
And it was not only insanely rude to such a close ally as Germany to do that to them on a visceral level, to do it in the middle of winter, because they thought that they would go wobbly during winter because they wouldn't have natural gas to heat their homes, to keep their bodies warm. That's just collective punishment, which itself is a war crime. But that natural gas was also the reason that Germany has remained a competitive industrial exporter. So you not only hurt the German people's bodies' warmth in winter, America just destroyed their ability to be an industrial power.
Yes. Well, while simultaneously, and to your point, with the recent failure of Greece and Germany enforcing those austerity measures, the Germans were already skittish about what was going to happen in Italy and Portugal and Spain. So not only, so you're talking about the entirety of the Troika and the OECD. I mean, you're weakening their entire position in an already decaying financial Eurozone.
Yes. And there are other pipelines that are being built through Turkey to Italy that can help Southern Europe have some supply. But this was pre-existing infrastructure that had a direct benefit for Germany's entire industrial export-based economy. And now you see things like some of their largest, most important companies like BASF, one of the world's leading chemical companies, moving to China. And I think BASF is a descendant of IG Farben, which supplied the Zyklon gas for the Holocaust. And other German companies, other ones are moving to China, but I believe it was the tattered remnants of the Build Back Better bill, which had none of the progressive promises Biden campaigned on, none of it which still echo in the minds of shitlib as something that Biden did. He's doing what better than we expected domestically, which is a load of horseshit. But buried within that bill were incentives for multinational companies to come to America because we just caused the energy costs in Europe to skyrocket. So America and China are just stealing all of the industrialized, the remnants of Germany's industrial export economy.
Of course.
And they're trying to make a chip manufacturing plant in Arizona, a subsidiary of the one in Taiwan, but it's costing like 4 times what it costs to create such a plant in Taiwan, in Arizona.
Of course. Yeah.
And it boggles my mind that they're willing to do this to Germany. And as Putin said, Germany is still occupied. I mean, 80 years after the end of World War II, there's still 30,000 American troops in Germany, and Germany is still so subservient that the reporter that said to President Biden in the meeting that we started off this podcast discussing, "But how will you do this when it is a German and Russian project?" And he said, "Oh, believe me, we have our ways." And the reporter is bilingual, so she asked Schultz in German, "Well, do you know what's going on? How are you going to do this?" And he answered in German, "Everything we do of importance with America, we do together." So they're ready to continue to being a vassal. And even as Russia insulted Germany for continuing to be a vassal, recently, a week or so ago, some high Chinese officials said that America's battle for the hearts and minds and political economy of the global South, it's over.
It's over.
They lost. So their only hope now is to just try to retain Europe, which they're treating as a mafia bust out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an omnivorous absorber of YouTube, and I watch a lot of mafia videos.
Sure.
And they say, "Pay us for protection." You wouldn't want your company to go up in flames now, would you?
Sure.
And so the companies most often pay, but if the mafia sees any way to just extract immediate ready cash out of that business and destroy it in the process, they'll do it even if they are paying protection.
Well, and you bring this up repeatedly with Iran and Russia and China and other the BRICS conglomerate and everyone that has been decimated previously by the sanctions regime, of how ineffective that's already become. You bring this up repeatedly, that those black markets open up so fast. And those black markets from the 90s have turned into the point where now there are entire systems that can circumvent those sanctions. So the United States is creating its own de-dollarization and putting it on steroids because so many nation states and people are used to dealing with this that they've already created the process to circumvent and create something new. This is years in the making, and now it's happening right in front of everybody's face on steroids at hyperspeed.
Yeah, these yutzes in control of the federal government now couldn't be destroying American neoliberal finance capital and de-dollarization any quicker if they intended to do so.
It's incredible.
And the sanctions that they now have on 32% of planet Earth.
Yeah.
And the theft of many countries that they disagree with politically, their foreign reserves and their gold, 300 billion of gold and foreign reserves of Russia, 70 billion of gold and reserves of Venezuela.
Yeah.
That was stored in the city of London.
That's right.
The special relationship of the UK and the US means just the UK being a junior partner to do the US's bidding, like stealing Venezuela's gold. These things are not as clever as the American political elites and financial elites think they are. They are one of the major factors leading to the rapid de-dollarization. And America thought they were being so clever with Russia by kicking them off SWIFT and stealing their money. But kicking them off of SWIFT and having MasterCard and Visa cease operations in Russia a week or so after Special Operation Z commenced in Ukraine, all it did was solidify the economic ties that Russia already had with China. And Russia already had integrated its bank messaging system with China's. Russia has recently integrated its bank messaging system with Iran.
Yeah.
Russia has offered to integrate its bank messaging system with India. Russia has become a major new energy supplier to India, which has almost as ravenous an appetite for energy and resources as China. And most people already know about how extensive the Belt and Road Initiative is across Eurasia and the Maritime Silk Road to especially East Africa and crossing the African continent and to South America. But less well known is the international north-south transportation corridor between St. Petersburg, Moscow, to the Caspian Sea through Central Asia, down through possibly Azerbaijan, but also through Caspian Sea to bypass Azerbaijan, direct to Iran, and then from Iran to India.
Sure.
So Russia is creating its own opportunities independent of the Belt and Road Initiative. And with the collaboration of particularly those four countries, Russia, China, Iran, and India, we see a kernel of a major new system that is going to supplant the SWIFT system and the dollar-led system. And we could also look at the various currencies that are in the process of being formulated and soon to be introduced.
Absolutely. Well, the other interesting thing that you bring up about capital flight and what that's going to mean for real people in specific countries and populations, you know, when you bring up IG Farben, we don't have to look that far back to see what this looks like, where economics marries geopolitics very closely. So when you bring up IG Farben and what this looked like as a matter of economics, and you see capital flight, citizens in the United States are going to find out very, very quickly how patriotic the firms are in their country because, just like the founders of Marathon and Ford and on and on and on, when they see the writing is on the wall and being involved in the dollar in meaningful ways is going to start costing these banks and firms money, they're going to move off of it so quick and hedge to the other side, creating extremely harsh conditions in the United States. So you're going to have American firms accelerating the demise of the lifestyles of the citizens of the United States very quickly because the writing's already on the wall. They're going to move their money out so quick to other countries and other loops and synergies very, very quickly. And it's going to accelerate all of this and create a feedback loop.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. These transnational corporations
That's right.
are delighted to use a powerful state with a powerful military like the United States for their own corporate ends, but they have absolutely no loyalty whatsoever to the concept or even the founding principles of the United States, and they have less than no loyalty to the actual citizens of the United States.
That's right.
The way that the United States is now treating the soon to be impoverished western end of Eurasia, Europe, as a mafia bust out to just strip it dry.
Yeah.
So too, the American political and financial elites are willing to treat America and its citizens as a mafia bust out and strip it dry. Let's go back a little bit to IG Farben again and World War II.
Yeah.
Allen Dulles was in the Office of Strategic Services during World War II.
That's right.
And his station was Zurich, Switzerland, which at the time still had banking secrecy. And Dulles was in Zurich because it was a capital of international high finance with a very high degree of confidentiality. And he was the go-between between Ford Motors and IG Farben and Prescott Bush, the father of H.W. Bush.
Yeah, that's right.
The grandfather of George W. Bush was in intelligence in World War I and then went to Wall Street at Brown Brothers Harriman and was an exemplary archetype of the Wall Street wing that was working through Dulles and OSS and the German industrialists to fund both sides.
Yeah.
Because they didn't give a shit about the American soldiers or the German soldiers, the American people, the Allied people, and the Axis people and the Axis soldiers. They didn't give a fuck. It's the same way Rothschilds made its grandest fortune by funding both sides of the Napoleonic Wars.
That's right.
That Wall Street and Bush as an exemplar, Prescott Bush as an exemplar, Dulles as an exemplar technocrat, using Switzerland as a predecessor, what I call a hinge jurisdiction that can play both sides.
Yeah.
To display that they have no loyalty except for making money. And you can find PDFs of Allen Dulles's letters to IG Farben executives and German industrialists where his closing salutation is Heil Hitler.
Yeah, sure.
Signed Allen Dulles.
Yeah.
And then actually, Ford got compensated for Allied bombing of Ford plants in Germany.
That's right.
After World War II. And Prescott Bush was under charges for under the Trading with the Enemy Act for his investments in Germany, which then got swept under the rug. And he was a major benefactor and political promoter of a certain congressman from Southern California named Richard Nixon.
Yeah, right.
There's
Yeah,
a there's a funny photo of Nixon's wearing a fedora, early 50s.
sure.
Prescott Bush is like 20 years older, so he's being really condescending. Nixon's wearing a fedora, and Prescott's kind of tapping his fedora.
Patting him on the head. Sure.
Yeah, he's like 4 inches taller
Yeah.
than Nixon, so he's patting him a little below him.
Sure.
Oh, you're going to be my good little dog and pony show for the next 2 decades.
Well, and then so you bring that up and look at the lineage continuing when General Electric literally buys Ronald Reagan and puts him on TV to show a bunch of products. So GE buys Reagan, and then Reagan espouses the Chicago Boys stuff for the whole rest of his entire adult life, which they paid for to turn into a very successful political career that runs this playbook.
Alas, the only president who was ever a member of a union. Screen Actors Guild president.
Yeah.
But I think that is where my admiration for Reagan begins and ends. Because,
Sure.
as you say, he was a bought and sold literal front man.
Yeah, he was the bag man.
For what at the time was
Mhm.
the predecessor archetype of transnational conglomerates having their fingers in so many industrial sectors and
Mhm.
commercial sectors. And then what with Maggie Thatcher was one of the two greatest Western leaders to bring in this neoliberal finance capital and right-wing tyranny. Well,
Sure.
not even right or left, it's just finance capital.
Yeah.
Tyranny that we live under today, which is in the process of killing itself. So back in the day, Switzerland played that function as a hinge jurisdiction that could finance both sides of World War II and
Sure.
profit both sides of World War II. And then the American political and financial elites that helped actualize that were not only not punished, they were able to fund the further political ambitions of his son and grandson, George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people suspect that, well, George H.W. Bush was probably in Dealey Plaza when JFK was assassinated.
Yeah.
Because, you know, someone, when he was campaigning for the presidency, someone asked him where he was, and he said he didn't remember.
Right.
I wasn't born yet, but as I'm told, there is no one that was alive and sentient in the United States that does not remember where they were.
Right. That moment, that day,
exact moment,
that entire day. Yeah.
That day,
that moment, that day. Yeah. Even milkmen and paper boys knew where they were. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the myth of George H.W. Bush is that he left the Yankee world
Mm-hmm.
to the Midland, Odessa, Texas world.
Sure.
And
yeah. From Connecticut to the Permian Basin.
from the New England prep school world in
Sure.
Yale.
Yeah.
To the Permian Basin.
Yeah.
And I believe it's Carl Oglesby who has it, who puts it as the war between the Yankees and the Cowboys.
That's a good joke.
But George H.W. Bush was smart enough, and I'm sure under the advice of his father, was smart enough to see the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
So that he could be a bridge between both.
Yeah. To the point where Junior had a fake Texas accent. That was actually pretty good.
It was convinciatory to me, Mark French. And then he had his friend Turd Blossom.
Yeah.
Karl Rove to
Uh-huh.
be his brainiac.
Yeah.
But I believe, and many others do as well, that Skull and Bones, which HW, I believe Prescott, Prescott,
Hmm.
because
Yep.
Prescott Bush was part of that crew from Skull and Bones, the Yale Secret Society,
That's
that
right.
stole Geronimo's bones and left it in their crypt, their frat house in Yale.
Yeah.
Then George H.W. was a pledge,
Hmm.
and then W was a pledge too.
Yeah.
And Skull and Bones, and John Kerry was in Skull and Bones. And
Yeah.
Skull and Bones and Yale in general has been a major, especially in the beginning, was a major recruiting ground for the successor to the Office of Strategic Services in World War II.
Absolutely. Yeah.
With after 1949, and Truman helped pass the National Security Act, which created the national security state, including the CIA. And when the CIA was still a young organization in the late 40s and 50s, Yale was a recruiting ground, and many people think George H.W. was among its earliest recruits,
Hmm.
and that they used his Zapata Oil Company, named just with the most bitterly possible irony after one of the greatest and most intriguing revolutionaries of Mexican history.
Yeah, that's right.
But they had a lot of offshore oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico.
Hmm.
And a lot of people think that those were used to help do some of the logistics for the perennial anti-Castro efforts
Sure.
that the CIA helped coordinate. And there is some significant evidence that George H.W. Bush was at Dealey Plaza and reported back to the CIA what happened. And then Reagan got elected, but was as disinterested in actually governing as Trump was.
Hmm.
So H.W. Bush was also director of CIA in the mid 70s,
Sure.
and then was probably the power behind the thrones and the brains behind the thrones and the organization behind the throne during Reagan's 8 years. And in the midst there, some conspiracy theories, there's not enough data to say whether it's true or false.
Sure.
Some, there's a preponderance of evidence. That's where I start believing. Some come with motherfucking receipts.
Yeah. Well, and listen to how fun what you just said, the playbook was already there. Smedley Butler, people in the United States act like that wasn't a real speech on recorded television at the time. That doesn't exist. So you get into Arbenz and Guatemala, and so you have this playbook over and over and over, turning into Iran Contra, and so there's the Dulles brothers. So you have the structure is there where you see this happen repeatedly. After World War II, where does everyone think all this right-wing fascism came from? Where where did all the Nazis go? So you see, World War II turns into all of this right-wing Chile, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama. I mean, this stuff comes to life after World War II down there, and our fingerprints are all over it.
Exactly. And let me finish up H.W. Bush being the brains behind Reagan, and then we'll circle back to exactly the points that you just brought up. Because there are some conspiracy theories that come with absolute receipts. And one of them during Reagan's 8 years was the savings and loan crisis.
Yeah.
And even though Reagan was purely the GE paid and promoted front man that eventually got into the presidency, he was still smart enough to know enough of what was going on before the Alzheimer's took over towards the end of his second term.
Mm-hmm.
And when he signed the legislation deregulating the savings and loan industry, he turned to his cronies and said, I think we hit the jackpot. And who was Reagan's campaign manager in late 1970s and 1980? Who could it have been? Oh, I don't know. I'm reaching back here to a character made by Dana Carvey in Saturday Night Live. It's the church lady. Who could it have been? Oh, I don't know. Could have been any. Satan! Reagan's campaign manager for his first run was William Casey, who he then put in as the head of the CIA.
That's right.
And one of the articles that we're kind of skirting around the edges of is the incessantly worsening information warfare. And I have a quote in that from Casey. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false.
Yeah.
It's 43 years ago. We're a little behind schedule, but we're right on track.
I'm not sure they're behind schedule at all.
It might be going just according to plan and tempo.
Yeah.
And to take it back to Smedley Butler, the whole thing that he brought to the public consciousness when he wrote War is a Racket and made that film that you're referring to, is he said that a lot of American industrialists, particularly led by DuPont, which sold a lot of munitions and chemicals in World War I.
That's right.
And they are related to the Forbes too. And John Kerry's middle name is Forbes. So you see how they're all interrelated.
Sure.
But Smedley Butler, some American industrialists, primarily DuPont interests, approached him to lead a military coup against FDR because there was gathered in Washington, D.C., tens of thousands of desperate, hungry, poor, combat-trained men who were promised bonuses for their services in World War I.
Yeah.
But because they were in the midst of the Depression, they wanted their bonuses right away.
Of course.
And Smedley Butler said, fuck you, American industrialists. I've been what he called high-powered muscle for United Fruit in Central America. And
that's right.
And made Mexico safe for Brown Brothers Harriman. And he's naming names and showing the receipts.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm not going to do it anymore. And he told FDR, and here comes my refrigerator.
Hey, it's perfect timing.
So this might be
Butler. Yeah.
This might be part one, and we'll resume later with part two of Smedley Butler and the decline of American civilization. This has been the Hardline According to Stonefruit, signing off.